How did it feel to be a flight attendant in the 60s?
It was exciting. It was exhilarating, actually. And it was a time period where it was special to fly.
Yeah.
So your passengers were very dressed up. And more men than women seemed to fly. Men always wore suits that were black, brown, and gray. And women often wore suits and often had corsages because it was that special.
Uh-huh.
That's changed dramatically. Because
Yeah.
people get often on buses, on planes, pardon me, the way people get on buses now.
Yeah, that's right.
They're way more casual. Also, we didn't have loading bridges in those days.
Yeah.
So you, a flight attendant taking boarding passes, we'd often have a blanket wrapped around our uniform while we took the boarding passes because it was cold at the door. And going down the steps, the open steps, sometimes I remember losing a shoe that went under the fuselage. And another girl said she was wearing a wig at the time when we could wear wigs, and it flew off her head and was floating down the runway, and there was a ramp fellow on the ground, and she was yelling, my wig, my wig. He said, oh, it's a rabbit. And she said, no, it's my hair, it's my hair. And he had to run and get it. You know, there's a lot of crazy stories it seems so primitive now, but that was very real.
What type of plane were you first flying on?
Oh, I was on the propellers, the Viscounts and the Vanguards.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Obviously, we've got a Viscount here. Looking at that galley in the back, what was involved with a meal service in there?
Well, everything is very compact. It's amazing what they've come up with in order, and of course that's improved tremendously on the newer aircraft. But everything was just very tiny. You worked in an extremely small space. But it worked. And in those days, we didn't have trolleys, so we ran the trays.
Oh.
So you would run the length of the aircraft with your trays, back and forth, back and forth. So that was a huge difference, for sure. And of course, the smaller aircraft were much more personal. So you chatted a whole lot more, for sure. Yeah.
How about food service?
Oh, that's changed tremendously.
Yeah.
Hugely so. And I think when I started in '66, what we served on the overseas flights was just beautiful in first class. We had the beautiful blue ice with caviar and chilled vodka and carving of the roasts and everything. It was lovely. It was absolutely beautiful. That has changed. They reduced that somewhat. It's still lovely, but it's more of a business class level, which is a little bit more sensible probably from the eating perspective, but not quite as elaborate. And the economy, of course, has dramatically changed, as we know.
Yeah.
They always got meals, but that changed to snacks, and now, of course, you pay for a meal, so it's an entirely different thing. Actually, it's interesting when I think back, my first year, I used to write home about how many filet mignons I had on a flight, during a month. That was a really big deal for some reason, because we always seemed to serve so many of them. And if there was leftover, the crew could have them.
Oh.
And I would think this was wonderful, which is funny to me now, but at the time it was really kind of neat. And when I think it was about the year I retired, we were serving roll-ups, and I think one of them was a meatball roll-up, and one of the flight attendants said she was disgusted and she wouldn't serve it, and I said, oh, let me do it. And I had a lot of fun going down asking people if they'd like a meatball roll-up, and I'm thinking my career has come from filet mignon to meatball roll-ups. But I got to the stage where at one point I served it and I was pushing my trolley and a fellow rang his bell. And I said, yes, sir. And he opened his roll-up and he said, shouldn't there be meat in there? And I said, I'm sorry, sir, it's the cutbacks. And I kept on going on purpose. Well, everybody just, of course, cracked up. And I went back and gave him a full roll-up. But it was wonderful. I mean, I waited my whole career for that to happen.